Guess what? We're live. It's the Mindstate Marketing Hour
Woo!
with our favorite, Will Leach. Hey, let me run this intro. We got a
Mhm.
guest today. The Mindstate Marketing Hour with Will Leach. I'm Steve Brown, your co-host. And today we're having a conversation with Lisa Wilding-Brown. She's CEO of InnovateMR. Welcome to the show, peeps.
Good to see you again, Steve. Good to see you again. You look great today. You look energetic to me.
Me?
Yeah. Lisa always looks great. She doesn't have those. She doesn't need that like early affirmation to make the show run. She, so I have to give this to you every week, Steve.
I need it, truthfully. I'm a little needy. I think I'm sensitive too sometimes. It's my dog will hurt my feelings every once in a while, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm seeing a therapist, so I think I'm working through this. But
Only
hey,
2 more decades.
this is a favorite part of my day, truthfully. Folks, if you don't know Will Leach, here's the reason all three of us are here. You see this little book? This little book, I read it one day, and the epiphany, that's my big word of the day, the epiphany I took away was my messaging, my marketing messaging was a one-size-fits-all messaging. And when I read this book, I was like, now I can tee up my messaging to fit my audience, right? If I know the state of mind they're in when they're considering the solution I am offering, then why wouldn't I write more dialed into that audience? And that's what this book does. If you don't have this book, then I'm not going to shame you, but you can't be with the cool kids in the behavioral marketing world because this is a #1 rated podcast, right, Will?
It is. It was the #1 rated marketing research podcast. Yes. So we're on a roll right now. It's because of our great guests, to be honest with you, Steve. We have great guests that come and they enlighten us. They do. It's great. It's great to have everybody here. It's great to be on the podcast. And it's great to see you, Lisa. I'm so glad to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you guys. I'm thrilled to be here. I feel so privileged to be on the #1 podcast in market research. Not #2, not #3, #1.
Nope, we do not play second place here. Well, let me just start off. I'm going to introduce you really quickly, Lisa, but I would love to just start off. One of the first questions like you're going to tell me is like, how did you get here? But hey, guys, for those of you who don't know, which can't be very many, Lisa is the CEO of a very innovative firm called InnovateMR. She has got a large background, lots of different roles. I met Lisa actually, probably about a decade ago or something like that, where I was lucky enough to interview with her when she was the chief operating officer of a company called USAMP. Now, many of you out there are thinking like, wow, why were you interviewing with a company called USAMP? Well, it was just before I started Trigger Point, and a buddy of mine said, you have got to meet Lisa. I want you to come over, but you've got to meet this girl, Lisa. And he said, would you want to do an account services role? Which I was on the client side, and I never want to do an account service role. Like, who wants to do that? But I interviewed, or I guess I'm not sure if it was an interview, it's much more as a conversation, Lisa. But like, we just connected. It was awesome. I think we probably could have talked all afternoon. You got me out of there in an hour. But I, at that point, like, I didn't even know very much about the jobs. I don't think even Robert knew a whole lot about it. But I was like, I just want to work with Lisa. And so I got the chance to work with Lisa for the better part of a year, maybe even a little more than a year. And then it gave me enough time to figure out who I was as an author, who I was as a business leader. And I started my own company. But we've kept in touch for years. And hey, Steve, so have you got a pencil? Because I'm gonna write down I want you to write these down. There's a couple of things about Lisa and these accolades. I couldn't believe it. So we just got to keep this big list, right? So Lisa is a founding member of the Multicultural Insights Collective, which I didn't actually know that. Inaugural member of the Insights Association's Laureate Program, top Insights 250 leader for a couple of years now. And I'm not going to embarrass you much more. I'm going to say this. You are a big proponent of WIRE, Women in Research, which is a huge initiative for research. It's been groundbreaking for so many women in research, and even all of us in research. It's so great to have you as a member and really a supporter financially and giving your time, but also a mentor to so many researchers out there. And we'll talk about this a little later on. You are on the SMR Global Council, So, and there's the whole bunch of other things, Steve, I didn't even talk about. So, Lisa, it is great to have you on the show. Everyone knows you. Everyone loves you. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on. And we're going to talk today about kind of your life in marketing research and some things that you've learned. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Oh, thank you, Will. That was an amazing introduction. I appreciate it. Yeah.
It was easy. It was very easy. So, Lisa, let's just start off because there could be somebody out there who is on the show. And hey, if you are listening live, ask questions. That's why we're doing it live, right? So come in with your questions. Come, go to the chat function, whatever you're at, whether it's YouTube or LinkedIn, and ask any questions you may have of either of us. But Lisa, you're now the CEO of a very large innovative marketing research company, but you started off somewhere else, right? So tell me about your life. How did you end up here?
Oh God, it went by like in a whirlwind. I don't know. It just went by so quickly. I still feel like I'm a teenager, but my age does not represent that. I started at Harris Interactive in 2003 as a project manager. And it's funny, Will, when I first joined, they said you can either be on the Caddy team or you can be on the internet project team. That's what they called it. The internet project team. Yeah. It's like, wow, that's a big lofty role, the whole internet. But at that time, it was really interesting. At that time, there were so many clients that were transitioning from offline methodologies to this online world and finding ways to really navigate the transition of moving between modalities. So it was a really great time to start in the industry. I was there for till about 2009. So I started off in the operations team, working on online research projects, working closely with the research team to develop and design the questionnaires, run the field from start to finish, working with all different types of functions at the organization. And then an opportunity came up to join the panel team. And at that point, the Harris poll was pretty small. And we really wanted to expand that team and grow it and grow the panel. And so I kind of fell in love with Sample way back when. And I know that sounds so nerdy. Like that is a nerd alert statement to make. I just want to take it back. But I loved it. I loved it because I got the opportunity to work with the survey methodology team who was doing so much research on research. So I had these great role models. They weren't sort of formal mentors like you see today with all the amazing mentorship programs out there, including Wire's mentorship program, which I've been a participant of for several years now. But I knew greatness when I saw it. And so I got the opportunity to work with some really leading pioneers to the online research space. And that exposure just really ignited such a passion inside of me for research and for Sample. There I go again with the nerdy commentary. But yeah, it was a really great place to start. I learned a lot of things along the way. I think I had a different boss every year I was there. There was a lot of change that was happening at the organization. And then we were kind of all as an industry heading towards the recession that happened in 08-09 period. So that was an interesting time as well. A lot of learning surfaced for me during that experience.
Yeah, it's funny in that too, that I don't think people, and I wasn't a part of that change because I was on the client side, that change from kind of telephone to internet, that was a massive disruptive force in marketing research. I don't think people really realize, I don't know how many years that was, but how fundamentally it changed every methodology you could do, how you could do things, everything else. And that transition must have been hard, but also you must have learned so much on the fly. Truly entrepreneurial stuff, right? You had to, it's not like, even though you're working for a large company, you had to have been working more like an entrepreneurial mindset, just trying to figure stuff out because nobody knew. I can't imagine many people knew what they're really doing back then.
Oh yeah. I mean, we were helping to migrate really long-standing tracking studies with, a strong legacy of norms to benchmark against. And now we're introducing this whole new modality that presents so much opportunity for researchers and for survey participants, right? There's sort of all sorts of bias in any type of methodology. But I think what was so exciting with that transition was just there was so much you could get done on an online environment that you really couldn't get done in an offline environment. It's self-administered, so the participant can come in at their own convenience. You can show them multimedia. You can, navigate them through all different types of different question paths. It really was a really exciting time, but there was no playbook. And that's why it was exciting to work at Harris, because they were really seen as the pioneers of online research. So they were doing all of the internal research on research to understand what those implications were, what the trade-offs were. And really helped to shepherd clients through that change. And, it did feel like a heavy lift, because it was, but I still think trying to get clients to move from online desktop to mobile is still a bigger challenge than going offline to online. And the reason why that is, Will, is because you didn't really have to give up a lot when you made the offline to online transition. It was more like all the extra benefits that you are now getting through online as a methodology. Whereas when you go from desktop to mobile, as a researcher, you feel like you're giving up some things, right? Like there's some upside, right? You get sort of the geofencing and the on location and the in the moment context that was so exciting for us when we worked together at USAMP with mobile. But, in terms of the presentation that is able to be, put up on this, tiny little screen versus a nice big monitor, you have to really rethink the way that you do your research. And in often cases, I think a lot of researchers have a tendency to sort of throw in everything because they want to make sure they get every question answered. And it can result in very long surveys. We all know that that's an issue that plagues the industry, but mobile users don't really tolerate that. So I just think it's interesting when you look at those modality transitions, the big ones that happen in our industry. And while moving offline to online felt hard, I still think it was harder from desktop to mobile.
So in that transition, this is a great segue. And the format of our conversation today is like, let's talk about a time we failed. And so in that transition, moving from phone to online, what was something that you thought was going to be like a home run that turned out to be a dud?
Well, I think we actually did a pretty good job of doing that transition, because there was so much rigor applied. But I do have a particular instance where I experienced a failure. First of all, I've had lots of failures. You don't get to this place in your career without breaking some glass. You try to mitigate it as much as you can, guys, but it's tough going, because you're sort of, you don't know what you don't know. And looking back at my time at Harris, because I had a different manager every year I was there, I also got to experience and observe other people's mistakes. So I think that's something that I would recommend to young people in the industry is be observant, watch, and take note of things that you like that your leadership team is doing and things that you don't like. And just take that down in your mental Rolodex for future use as you grow your own career. Because, certainly I think when you experience failure or some sort of misstep, it's going to hit you the hardest. You're probably going to have a bit of emotional baggage from it that you carry through your career, but you can still learn from other people's mistakes too. And if I go back and I look back at my career, I think there's sort of this theme of the power of no. When you're a people pleaser like me and someone that strives to be this overachiever, it's hard to say no. But that word is so powerful and so important. So the failures that I'm kind of thinking about and I want to talk about with you guys today kind of all root back to that concept of don't be afraid to say no. I think a lot of us who are hardworking individuals that take our careers very seriously just have it embedded in our kind of DNA to like always try to find a solution.
I'll find a way. I'll find a way.
Sometimes no, just no is overlooked. And so if I think back to my time, I was working on the panel team. I had been in the industry for, 2 years. I didn't really know much at all, to be honest. So I didn't feel like I had the agency to say no. And I think that's another thing for younger folks that might be listening is just because you're new to the industry doesn't mean you don't have a voice. You have to exercise your voice. And oftentimes you have a very unique lens that you're looking at life through and your work through that others around you don't, who maybe are a bit more jaded, more established in their careers and sort of relying on muscle memory to inform their next move. Yep. So young people have such an opportunity and folks that are more established have an opportunity to learn from them. But at that time, I didn't know what I didn't know. And so we were doing this initiative where when you run a panel, typically those panels are based on redemption models, meaning the respondent comes in, they earn points or whatever virtual currency is available for that particular panel. They bank in an online account, and then you can trade those points in at a later time. And there's a lot of benefit for that, for both the company and for the participant, and for quality in general, right? So from a company advantage standpoint, you can avail of what's called breakage. So not everyone's going to get to that threshold to redeem. So you can still garner activity in the panel, but you don't necessarily have to pay out direct cash. Instead, you sort of carry that liability of points, but they don't really have kind of like a meaningful value until the respondent actually cashes out, right?
Yep.
And at
credit card companies have the same issue. I've heard the same issues with credit card companies.
Yeah, exactly. And at that time, there really weren't virtual like gift cards. So we were working with a third-party company send like, I don't know, blenders and bird feeders to members.
Because that's what people need. That's what people want.
Yeah, 100%. But the reason why I bring up this use case is our finance team came to us and said, the liability is something we have to account for. It keeps building and building and building as you guys add more and more panelists. And we want a means to sort of, exercise that liability and get that down on our books. And so we started brainstorming different ideas, and we thought to ourselves, what if we did like a sweepstakes and we allocated, say, 10 grand to the sweepstakes? I don't remember what the exact prize was, but you can get entries into the sweepstakes if you turn in your points. So in that dynamic, the liability goes down. You can promote, this cool sweepstakes contest concept, get people excited, and everyone wins.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time thinking, shouldn't we test this? Shouldn't we test this with like a small subset of the panel before we just blast the whole panel? Because the thing I learned, even in those early years, is that there can be unforeseen consequences when you make big moves like that. And I remember saying to the leadership team there, hey, why don't we just get like a small sample of the panel, test this concept and see, and just watch it for a while and just make sure we can kind of really have time to see how it will impact the panel in terms of attrition and engagement and redemption activity and all this. And I was told, no, there's no time for that. We need to get that liability down this quarter so we can claim it this quarter. And, at the time I was like, oh, it doesn't really feel like a smart idea, but I went forward with it, and I rolled it out. And because I was new, I was, or greener, I was the one doing a lot of the heavy lifting. I was the worker bee in that situation. So I was developing copy and pulling, IDs from the database and kind of project managing this. So we did it. We blasted the whole panel. And yeah, the liability went down, but there were some unforeseen consequences. Our redemptions skyrocketed.
I knew you were going to say this, dude. I knew you were going to say this. Yeah.
Oh, it was brutal. As I saw those redemptions coming in, I was like, no, because any kind of savings that we generated with the liability approach through the sweepstakes was completely offset by just a flurry of people making redemptions that we didn't kind of predict.
Otherwise wouldn't have.
Yeah, we sort of woke up the dead, really.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
There's people in your panel that have a big currency kind of balance, but they're not really doing anything with it. And then you remind them about it. Then they take action. They didn't take surveys like we wanted them to, or trade in their points. They actually went in and made redemptions. And so it was a bad situation, guys, real bad. In fact, people got let go because of this situation. And it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. I felt so bad for those that were impacted.
Yeah.
And, again, I was a worker bee, so I was just sort of following orders. So I was saved, but the folks that stopped making the decisions, some of them didn't make it, which was sad. But it just goes back to this idea of feeling like you have the agency to offer your perspective and really push and advocate for your perspective, bring evidence, bring data to justify your opinions is certainly a piece of advice I would give to anyone. So I could have done more of that, but I didn't really have a benchmark to compare to because it was like a new initiative. So the power of no is important. And my next story, reinforces that as well. So
Yeah. It reminds me, I tell my son this, my son is a teenager now, and I didn't learn this lesson until probably my mid 30s. And I'm still learning all the time. But I think growing up, and I was in the military, so I had this concept that the person above me has data, has understanding that I don't have. Therefore, when they do something that doesn't make a lot of sense, I go, but they have information. It's like the government. The government knows that the potholes, it's not the right time to put change the potholes right now because they know something, or the traffic is off, but they have all the information. They're choosing not to do something because they have information I don't have. And guys, and especially if you're an entrepreneur, there's two things I'm going to point out to you. One is you think people have information and therefore you don't push back. The older I get, the more I realize that we don't have the information. And so they do need you to step up with, say something, because your information is as good as their information. Honest to gosh, I didn't realize this, but it happens in government. It happens in large organizations all the time. And the second thing, Lisa, what you said, which was important, again, if you're an entrepreneur, is that power of no. When I first started my company, I reached out to a gentleman from Olson Zaltman, and he told me, Will, I was telling him, I'm going to try this company. I don't know really what I'm doing. He goes, the best advice I'm going to give you is to know what you're not going to work on. What I'm not going to work on. And he goes, write it out. And I didn't do it. And looking back, my first 3 years, because what happens is people always have big ideas. They were like, oh, Will, we should partner. Will, we should figure out a way to work together. And you're young in your entrepreneurial, kind of journey. And you're thinking, this could be a great relationship. We could do something great together. And you work on this stuff and you realize that you're working on somebody else's dream. You're not always working on your dream. And I didn't realize how to kind of mitigate that until I realized the things I will not work on. And I'm still not great at it, but having that list of no is really, really important. Whether you're, in the corporate side, whether you're on a supplier side, or whether you're just trying to run your own business, that power to say no and say it in a nice way. There's great ways of saying it in a nice way. This isn't something I want to do right now or whatever. But it's an important thing to do, because you're not only just helping yourself, but you're helping that company by saying no. You're helping the other person to figure out the way on their own sometimes. And that's oftentimes the better thing for you to do for anybody, frankly.
Yeah, 100%. And I think when I was at a large organization, it's sort of like this big machine that's operating. And so you're a bit more siloed and more focused. Your scope is more narrow. And so you don't always know, kind of, the right hand isn't always talking to the left hand in the way that you think it is. But you touched on something that totally resonates with me. So after I left my first company, I went over to USAMP, where you and I worked together. And, that was a big change for me. I went from this large, publicly traded global company to a tech startup with like maybe 10, 15 people. I had to be like deprogrammed, because first of all, I was trying to over process everything that they were doing. I was like, you guys don't have a process for this? Like, we gotta operationalize this. We gotta put SOPs together. We should have a request form. Like, I had to be deprogrammed 100%, because that's not how to be successful in a startup environment. You have to run quickly. You have to figure out ways to keep the lights on. And you really have to build that foundation for the future. And you don't always have time to like cross every T and dot every I perfectly. So the perfectionist in me kind of really got deprogrammed. And I recognized, okay, not everything has to be perfect. This sort of ideal perfect state doesn't really exist in a growing business. It has to be, you don't want to sacrifice great for this goal.
That's what I was thinking. Maybe you shouldn't do it. Yeah, right. Maybe you shouldn't do a process, which is crazy.
But I totally know what you're talking about. I call it sort of the shiny nickel syndrome. And in the early days, because that experience working there really like ignited this entrepreneurial spirit in me. Like, I'm actually meant to be an entrepreneur. I'm meant to build stuff, and it's been fully actualized now at this point in my career. But at that point, that's over, 14, 15 years ago.
That's right.
I didn't really appreciate that. And so I did see a lot of different companies coming to us, different partnership opportunities, different ideas that would surface during brainstorming sessions. And it was like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's go do that. Oh, that's a great product concept. Let's go build that. And, Matt, one of our founders, Matt Dusig from USAMP, and Greg Lavin, we have since, hindsight is 2020, 100%, right? Like, looking back as we were kind of building that business, we were scattered. We had so many awesome, great ideas that I think really stretched ourselves too thin. And, I think we really course corrected that when we got together again and to build Innovate. And that's really why I think we've been as successful as we have at this company versus the last one. Make sense?
Oh yeah. So tell me about, how does that power of saying no, a specific example that, maybe you said yes to, maybe it's at USAMP days or whatever that you said yes to, because maybe even the time it made all the sense in the world, but looking back with that hindsight that you said, I wish I would have trusted my intuition, or what could have helped you to say no and to realize maybe we shouldn't go down this path, whether it was, like I said, intuition, whether it was a piece of data that you saw, or maybe it was just pride that said, you let's go do it. And then, it cost you.
Yeah. Well, I think it's actually the stuff that you and I worked on together, Will.
To be fair, I said no. I didn't say no. I just said, let's go do it. I'm like that too. I mean, people are like, let's go do it. Let's go figure out how to sell this thing.
I mean, first of all, you were amazing. I have to say, you were one of the best hires I've ever made in my entire career, Will. And my only regret is that we didn't get to work longer together, but we've made up for it since. I mean, Will and I don't really work very closely together now, but I find excuses to talk to him on a fairly regular basis.
We try to make it business. We try to do some business, but
we've done some business together. But honestly, it's like I need my Will fix. So it's like get in line, Lisa. But so I think sort of the second challenge or second failure, I'll call it, is when we were together at USAMP, we went really hard at mobile. We wanted to be the first at mobile as sort of the new kid on the block, the new methodology that was going to revolutionize the industry. And so we would get up on our soapbox and sort of come with data and share the story. We could see that mobile penetration rates were increasing dramatically. You got to go where the users are, go where the participants are engaging. And it wasn't on desktop, it was on mobile. We could see that from the data. So we weren't being totally clueless, Will. But I do think we peaked too soon. And we went ahead and built out a mobile panel app, if you remember, and we managed to land a really great client, a big CPG firm. Yeah. And this was like the first time in our experience at USAMP where an end client was coming directly to a company like ours. Mostly we were working through MR agencies who were managing those relationships. And we know now that there's been so much more disintermediation, but back then it was kind of an odd thing, right?
So new, yeah.
Nowadays, a lot of end clients are going direct to panel companies for programming and hosting, buying their own sample. They're doing more with even sometimes more constrained budgets. They're doing more in-house versus, outsource. And so they're more open to using DIY tools and going direct. But back then it was very unusual, right? Yeah. And so we were like, whoa, we feel like we've made it. We're being recognized by this amazing CPG firm that wants to partner with us and be really the main kind of entry clients to this new methodology. And so on paper, it all looked so great, didn't it, Will?
Yeah.
It looked amazing.
Yeah,
and when they said jump, we said how high, and they said go build this. We said got it. We're going to build it for you, and we did all of that without any revenue commitment because we were so enamored by this brand.
Yeah,
and we thought we kept sending you and myself and others up to this headquartered office and spent a lot of time in that city together, and we just kept reacting to every request that they made. And it really scared us. We went and had to hire more staff and really build a whole kind of research arm to support this particular client.
One client. That's right.
One client. With the hope that there would be more clients that would embrace mobile. But I don't think what we appreciated here was that's a big risk. It's a big risk to take with the assumption that all the other folks in the industry are going to come onto this mobile train. I think it was probably back in 2012?
Yeah, it was 2012. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So, even though those mobile penetration rates were increasing dramatically, the industry wasn't ready to embrace that change. And so every year we would go to like the MRMW and we would, pontificate about all the advantages of mobile and show them our research and even co-present with this client and have them advocate for us. And we thought things would really come to fruition and it would be a major revenue contributor for the business. And unfortunately it wasn't. And I regret not going back and sort of saying no more, and also not pushing. I didn't push the sales team, to the salesperson and the leadership team to really get a revenue commitment to protect us. We just sort of hoped for the best because we were just, again, so excited to be working with this big brand. And ultimately what happened is, the board became very sort of disenfranchised with the numbers. And, I think ultimately that was the primary impetus for our founders to leave and to go here to start Innovate. And, USAMP was then later acquired. And I would say most of the staff there, unfortunately, were made redundant in that process. So it affected a lot of people's lives, not just ours. It affected a lot of people. And so there's a lot that I would have done differently. And I think it would have started by saying no more often and really keeping the team focused and not just sort of not letting our entrepreneurial spirit get away from us.
Yeah, I was just going to say and you talked about it, but there was an energy that was self-feeding itself in our office, because when I was there, you saw pockets of excitement, but then you would also see pockets like you guys aren't doing very well. And I was trying to solve for some of this stuff because we were promising things that could happen in the future, but we weren't really staffed to do it. But we're okay, we're going to go build it. And so there's this constant tension of, I remember calling back saying sometimes late at night, calling back Robert and saying, I don't know, man, they are not happy. And then the next morning we promised them something. Well, if you did that, then yes, we'd be so excited. And there's this constant tension of like, oh my God, they love us, they don't love us. But when we came back, it was almost like this energy of self-feeding itself. Like because I can remember when I was at PepsiCo and we had one of your competitors come to us and say they're going to build out this do-it-yourself panel. And I can remember laughing at this guy, like going, this is never going to work. It will never work. And so when I saw a big company that was saying, I will do this, it could work, it was like, wow, everything's changing. And it has changed since then. But back then, I should have almost read the room a little bit more, saying it didn't happen to a company I just left. And we were feeding ourselves.
Yeah.
Looking back, you don't know it in the time. In the moment, you're energetic, you're entrepreneurial, you're excited. You're going to do something that no company has done, which is literally, let's remove the middleman, the marketing research supplier firm out there, and let's become, let's just remove that and create a whole new marketplace. That's exciting stuff. But if you're too early, which arguably a decade too early, maybe 8 years too early, that's what happens when you self-feed yourself. You feed off
it was group think. You get a bunch of entrepreneurial, hardworking people in the same room, and we start to dream about what the future could look like. Someone's got to be in the room to say, hold your horses, people. Yeah. Like, let's get practical. Like,
this is financial data. Unfortunately, that's what it took, was the board, or maybe, some CFO basically saying, guys, let's look at the numbers. Yeah. And I think that's the important thing to take away from that failure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think a lot of companies kind of keep the financial information close to the vest. And that's a big disconnect that gets, for a number of reasons, right? You don't necessarily, privately held companies, self-funded companies don't want to go out and sort of share that information so that it gets out against competitors and gets used against you, right? Everyone wants to appear bigger than they are, right? So because of that dynamic, we didn't really have a lot of visibility. We kind of knew we weren't selling as much as we should be. We knew we didn't have a revenue commitment. But I think looking back, it would have been better to have us sort of owning the burden of financial performance versus the CFO at the time and the exec team kind of really having these private conversations without a wider group. Do you know what I mean? I think that's important. So transparency in my mind is key. You need to share as much as you're able to share with a wider group so that everyone can have this sort of collective focus on not just sort of the cool, sexy ideas, the new shiny nickel on the street, but also the implications and what it means from a dollar and cents perspective.
Amen. Great story.
Not to be a Debbie Downer, but that's ultimately what business is about. It's about making profits, right? And I think a lot of times people with the feet on the ground are just so far removed that they're not involved in some of those discussions, and that impedes progress, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
I hate those people. They always crush my fire.
I know.
So,
okay, well, let's not end on the Debbie Downer. So,
right?
we've gotten the two kind of times and things that you've learned. Don't say no. I'm sorry, the power of saying no.
Yeah.
And then even kind of like you said, that comes back again and like understanding when you really should be saying no and what metrics to look for. And don't self-feed the beast, I guess, and looking at shiny objects. So let's now talk about like a success. You look back on your career, life, whatever, and what is that thing that you're really proud of? Like you made the right choice. Tell us that story and kind of what you learned from that as well.
Well, I mean, it's not a particular story, and I think it kind of goes back to this idea of, I think a lot of us in the industry wait to a certain point, like when maybe we achieve a certain title, or we've had a certain tenure. We've been in the space now 10 years, 15 years, whatever your kind of track record is. But anyone kind of before that criteria, they don't feel credentialed to have the agency to push back and to be that voice. And I would just say for folks listening, please don't forget, everyone has a voice. Everyone has something to offer that can be very impactful and positive for the organization and for your career, no matter how long you've been in the space. I remember feeling ashamed that I wasn't in the industry for a long time when I was new. Like you hear these people say, I say, I've been in the industry 20 years. That immediately sort of establishes that like I'm older now. Yeah. I'm not the young kid on the block anymore. But I remember when I was like 2 or 3 years in, like I wanted to keep that on the down low. Like I didn't want people to know how green I really was. I wanted them to see me as someone that could add value. But so in terms of success, there's been a lot of great success, but I kind of feel like if just sort of overarching Innovate, what we were able to accomplish at Innovate. So keep in mind in 2014, Greg and Matt kind of left USAMP. It was devastating for them. It's like Greg said to me, it's like, I feel like I've raised a child till they're about 5 and now I'm being forced to give them up for adoption.
Wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. It kind of really broke my heart. And I said, okay, that's a lot of pain that we were harboring when we left USAMP to come and start Innovate. And we just said to ourselves, we've got to do this the right way this time around. The last thing didn't work out. Let's get focused. Let's figure out ways to say no, to keep us in our lane. We used to say, stay in your lane, stay in your lane, stay in your lane, because all of us suffer from shiny nickel syndrome. We're all entrepreneurial. We all want to get to yes. I know Kenny's like shiny nickel syndrome. Hi, Kenny. Hi, Priscilla. But it's one of those things where we just really stayed focused, and 8.5 years later, we're now 180 people. We are growing incredibly fast. We took on investment for the first time the start of the year with our wonderful partners over at CIBC, which is a private equity firm based in Chicago. And, if I look back to the last 8.5 years, it hasn't been easy. There's been struggles here and there, but I think I'm so proud of what we've been able to accomplish at Innovate. And up until January, we were completely bootstrapped, Will and Steve, like we were self-funded. And we've done this now, obviously, because Matt and Greg, and George and Michael wanted to pursue other things outside of the industry and really enjoy some of that equity that they've been building through the years. Right. Yep. But it's really helped us to think even bigger, right? How do we take this company now to the next level and be an industry giant? And I'm just so proud of what we've been able to accomplish. And I think it's because of those negative experiences. So here I'm kind of bringing it full loop here, guys. Your failures hurt when it happens, but they are wonderful tools to educate you and teach you about what not to do next time. And I think Innovate is really a reflection of what we didn't do more so than what we did. Do you know what I mean?
I do. Yeah. Doing it the right way. Right. It's a great way of, like you said, it builds that intuition, but now the intuition is a part of like your actual strategy. Like it's not just intuition, it's based upon your own past mistakes or whatever. So no, I totally get it. I love that. The hard part about that is for so many people is to remember those. So many people want to forget those mistakes. Like I have lots of mistakes that I don't remember until people remind me after the fact. Like, remember when you almost like cost Sunchips $100 million? Like, Yeah, that was a big mistake. Like I've talked about that on the show. But you want to forget about them, right? Because nobody wants to talk. And that's why I love this show, honestly, because I love the idea of talking about mistakes but things that we've learned and keeping those top of mind, because those are the things that make our next venture so much better for people, right?
100%. Yeah. We have to check our ego and our pride and be transparent. I mean, I think another great success for me personally is just getting involved in Wire and other organizations like SMR, which I know we'll talk about in a bit, but like being involved and sort of getting the heartbeat of what's happening in the industry from your colleagues that maybe you don't get to see every day. You don't work with them at the same company, but you're able to connect with them. Like I know Priscilla's listening, and Priscilla has been such a wonderful colleague through the years. We don't work at the same company, but I call her frequently, or she calls me frequently, or I see her at these different conferences and we trade notes. How are things going for you? What struggles are you dealing with? And that sort of moniker of always be helping, that in itself, you're giving back to the industry, you're giving back to these wonderful colleagues that you've, gotten to connect with over the years, but you're also constantly being fed intel and fed information and stories. So like you're another great example, Will. You and I talk on a fairly regular cadence because we just sort of talk shop a lot, don't we? Yeah. And these organizations are really so important. And I'm always on my soapbox telling younger folks in the industry or people not as involved, get involved. It will give you personally so much benefit. It will benefit your company. And, it really will help you take your career to the next level because you have context. And isn't that what research is all about? It's all about context and being as close to that decision as possible so that you can really provide great products and services. And business works the same way. The wider and kind of wider scope your context and your lens is, the just better employee and better thought leader you can be for the industry, in my opinion.
Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, Kenny's like, he just set up my segue. Talking about getting involved, and we need to talk about re-electing Lisa for SMR. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I've been on the SMR Council for the last 2 years. I was elected 2 years ago, and it's been just a wonderful, wonderful experience for me personally. Been involved in a lot of the different steering committees, and in each term, the president of SMR will sort of set the tone and the agenda for the council, with certainly collaboration and feedback from council members. But there's some really cool passion projects that I've been involved in. I've served on the steering committee for the DEI team. So putting community circles together. We've recently started to build out a repository or library of different DEI content from all different types of associations and different collectives and consortiums to sort of collate all the great work that's been done over the last couple of years and provide a great resource for members. And so we're continuing to build on that. I've also been part of the Young SMR Society, not because I'm young, because I'm not anymore. I don't qualify. You have to be under 30. But the goal there is to, really help these young folks find their feet. Because I think a lot of times when you start your career, first of all, most people in our industry fell into it. Yep. Is the feedback I've gotten from a lot of people. I'm no different. I fell into it. I wanted to be a journalist when I started. That's what I went to school for. Yeah. But I could write a mean blog, so I'm still using those writing skills.
That's good. Got to pay for that education somehow.
Yeah. I only paid off my college loan a few years back. Like honestly, it was a good day when I finally paid that off. But yeah, so really giving back and being involved in the council has been a true privilege, and really continuing to grow and show the value that SMR brings to its members is a passion of mine. So no, I am not 29, Priscilla. It says that in the comments there. Thank you though. So yeah, I'm running for re-election and voting is open. That closes on Tuesday of next week. On the 25th, and then it's announced on November 3rd. So we're looking forward to that.
Wow, right around our own election day. So, well, everybody out there, if you don't know how to vote for SMR, how would they do that? Just in case somebody's like, well, I've heard about this, but I'm not really even, how do I even do that? So how would they do that, Lisa?
Well, you have to be a member. And if you're not a member, I would say become a member. There's just so much great benefit there. And once you're a member, you'll receive an email from a third-party company that is hosting it. And you can make your selections virtually online. So it's pretty easy and straightforward.
A lot of great people out there, are running for lots of different kind of roles there. Lisa, you've added so much to the industry. Priscilla's running as well. She's adding so much to the industry. Like, it's amazing what she's been able to do in the last 4 years or 5 years.
It's amazing.
It's insane. And so everybody, please go vote. Figure out the candidates, vote for Lisa. She's amazing for our industry. She's bringing diversity, inclusion. She's bringing kind of a youthfulness, and we need youthfulness in our, you don't need more people like me on stages that much. I mean, I love being on stages. We need more youth. So let's get the younger audiences out there. And, but Lisa, thank you so much for being on the show. This was great. I hope everybody learned. Do you have any last words for us, Steve?
My takeaway is saying no is overlooked. I thought that was an excellent quote. And I forget that because I'm always like, well, try to figure this out. Let's make them happy. But there's power in going, this is not the path I'm supposed to invest in right now.
It's good for you and it's good for them most times.
Yeah. It's the Mindstate Marketing Hour. You guys go get Will's book. Lisa Wilding-Brown, you've been a great guest. Be sure to go vote for her on the SMR Council. Go sign up, become a member, get connected, and you can learn more about Will Leach and what he's got to offer you. Obviously, look at him bringing all these people together. We've had some great guests in this season. And now I'm going to run that little outro. Let me take this off here. All right. What else, folks? We've got, this is a podcast. It's not just a live stream. That's right. You can listen to this on Stitcher, iHeart, and all the other places that you love to listen to podcasts. And be sure to subscribe on YouTube. Tell your mom, tell your neighbors, tell all your friends. They're missing out if they're not tuning in to the Mindstate Marketing Hour. And we'll see you next. Thanks for being here, Lisa. Thanks Will.
Everybody. Thanks, Lisa.
You guys. Take care.
Bye.